It is the 20th of the 10th, 2025. The time is 5 minutes past 10, and we have ourselves some breaking news. Mohammed Ben Sulayem may have won the battle to maintain his status as FIA president, running unelected or unopposed even in 2025. But he might not have won the war, because when the US Department of Justice get involved, that's when, ladies and gentlemen of the F1 jury, it gets techier than techie things. Joe Sayward, again, goated journo, reports in his latest and greatest newsletter that it could be getting techier than techie things for Mohammed Ben Sulayem. And again, the context here is key. Mohammed Ben Sulayem, over the course of his tenure being elected in 2022, has done some questionable things by all accounts. Some very, very dodgy things. Lest we forget, posting a picture of him and Prince Andrew and Max Mosley to celebrate the anniversary of the Bahrain Grand Prix. Lest we forget, we are not rappers. Lest we forget Jewelry Great. Lest we forget all the people who he has since hired shortly thereafter, firing them. God tier intellectual personnel, stand up guys and girls, don't want to be associated at all with Mohammed bin Sulayem. This is now something of an autocracy, totalitarianism, potentially. Why are you saying that, Cameron? Well, Dave Richards said that he couldn't even go into the meeting where they were looking to amend for the statute. What is that? What are we doing here? This is nonsense. Can you spell democracy or lack thereof? Well, Tim Mayer was supposed to be running, but he can't get the bloody votes that he needs by dint of South America. There was only a couple of people nominated who can put forward a presidential candidate, and none of them have given the power, the support that Tim Mayer needed. Hence why Mohammed Ben Sulayem will run unelected. But again, at the outset, we set the scene as follows: that Mohammed Ben Sulayem might have won the battle, but I don't think he's going to win the war. Joe Sayward writes, and again, he's talking about Tim Mayer, the dude who was meant to run opposite Mohammed Ben Sulayem, but doesn't have the statute to back him, because who amended it? Mohammed Ben Sulayem amended it without the voting rights necessary. Here, allegedly. Here's what Tim Mayer says. The real campaign against Mohammed Ben Sulayem continues. For every club that still believes fairness matters, for every sport and mobility club that seeks equal access to information, funding and opportunity, for every participant who believes the FIA should support them, not compete with them, will continue to speak out for those who cannot and who will not rest until every member club feels free to speak for itself. He's talking to some sort of silencing, right? That Mohammed Ben Sulayem potentially, allegedly, is leveraging his financial resource with a view to silence those who have got something to say. Tim Mayer continues, across our extensive travels around the globe, many club members have told me we want to speak, but we cannot. They fear losing their project's funding or recognition if they question the current system. Oh, the humanity. Can you spell totalitarianism? We will keep driving the FIA forward until democracy, service and partnership are not just words in a statute, lip service settings without substance. He continues, quote, but the living values that define our federation every day, and we can bring into being the changes the FIA so desperately needs. Preach, Tim Mayer. He sounds like the guy going forward, right? But again, if you have a president who can change the statute whilst he's there with a view to run in perpetuity, to maintain his status as the FIA president until he so chooses to forfeit it, that is not democracy. Tim Mayer continues, it is clear that this is no longer a democratic process as far as the FIA presidential elections. When choice is replaced by control, democracy is diminished. Gonzo, Sakabo, faded to black. Tim Mayer also points out something salient, and again, if we're going to get into fiduciary malfeasance and wrongdoing, allegedly, here's where Tim Mayer points the finger. He says that he points out that Rodrigo Rocha, a Mohammed Ben Sulayem supporter, was allowed onto the list of candidates because of an esports event added to the international sporting calendar last month by an e-vote. What is this? What are we talking about here? Is this the FIA, the regulatory body of the F that wants $1 billion sports franchise? And we're talking about e-votes and esports. And what's worse, Mayor said that there is no evidence even that this event even took place. Can you spell web of light? This isn't good enough. This isn't fit for the sport that we know and love. This is the regulatory body, and this is how they behave. You know already that over the past 6 months, Mohammed Ben Sulayem has disbanded the audit committee, the committee whose remit it is to make sure that everybody's behaving to tick and cross the conduct of all associated and related parties of the FIA. And this is where we are. Chaos, chat. Techier than techie things, I told you. Buckle up. It's going to be a bumpy ride. Tim Mayer continues. He's not even listed on his own club's calendar on social media pages. This esports event did not happen. These lot are making up the rules as they go. And again, this is the regulatory body. If it's a Joe Schmo Tiddlywinks organisation, then copacetic. The optics don't matter. But since this is the FIA, the regulatory body of Formula One, a multi-billion dollar sports franchise, this doesn't feel like it's fit for purpose. Where's this esports? There's no record of it, no social media pages, which in fact is a situation that mirrors what happened the last time that he was on the ballot. An event was put on the calendar but never run. Is this how legitimacy should be built, says Tim Mayer? Is this how African motorsport is best represented? Is this how to grow the sport in this critical region with so much untapped potential? When elections are decided before ballots are casted, that's not democracy, that's theatre. Touché, sir. And when member clubs are left with no real choice, they become spectators, not participants. And lest we forget, Mohammed Ben Sulayem in 2022 ran on a mandate, a modus operandi of inclusion, did he not? Inclusion, not exclusion, of transparency, of openness. Every time I open up the FIA statements, that's all that they want to talk about. Sustainability, inclusion, understanding the sport, instituting the rules and the regs in a way which is true and fair and represented. If you ask me, none of the aforementioned have been ticked over the course of Mohammed Ben Sulayem's FIA presidential reign. Joe Sayward continues. Tim Mayer quoted from a report published by the Utrecht School of Governance, which conducted a study. Here's where it gets techie, chat. Buckle up. It's going to be a bumpy ride. Conducted a study, the Utrecht School of Governance, which conducted a study into the FIA using the Sports Governance Observer benchmark. So independent parties are now looking at the way in which the FIA operates. It continues. The executive summary is aptly titled Power Without Brakes. Oh, the humanity. He explained that the report rated the FIA's overall SGO index score at just 45%, which places the FIA among federations that have adopted the formal trappings of modern governance, but lack the robust institutional policies and safeguards. Can you spell Potemkin Village PLC? This is Shakespearean levels of false seeming now. Again, Mohammed Ben Sulayem ran in 2021 into 2022 on all of this sustainability gubbins, robust governance et al. None of that is what we see epitomised and gendered in the FIA as at the time of writing. The report says that the FIA's governance structurally concentrates power in the office of the president. How can this be democracy then? How can it be? Remember, Mohammed Ben Sulayem, you ran on democracy, you ran on sustainability and transparency. The FIA has been nothing but the opposite ever since. Opaque at best. You'll recall the private jet expenses that got billed to the FIA. What happened to sustainability, Mohammed Ben Sulayem? This report says that the FIA's governance structurally concentrates power in the office of the president, and accountability remains confined within a system over which the president exercises decisive control. Can you spell totalitarianism? This is not a democracy. A democracy is what Mohammed bin Sulayem ran on, but there is a difference, a chasm here between theory, the mandate as stated at the outset, and practice. This article continues. The presidential list system makes it difficult for challengers to stand for office. A closed list system and a nomination committee that acts as a powerful gatekeeping mechanism makes leadership continuity almost guaranteed. Ergo, Mohammed bin Sulayem can run as long as he wants in perpetuity without compunction, with impunity. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is dangerous. Surely shouldn't be able to do that. This article continues. The report says that unless independent oversight, open and competitive elections, transparent decision making and stakeholder representation are introduced, the FIA will remain structurally predisposed to the concentration of power, leaving leadership integrity, not institutional design, as the organisation's only line of defence against abuse. Bring back the audit committee. Where are they? Disband them. And then, of course, you're going to get things like this. The audit committee, again, for the avoidance of doubt, whose remit it was to ensure that all and sundry, all related parties, all associated parties with the FIA are behaving as they should do, that there is no misconduct, no underhanded goings on. History across international sport governance shows that such reliance invariably fails. Can you spell FIFA? We'll get to that because there are links here, and again it gets techier than techie things. If the FI continues down this path, says Tim May, it risks serious consequences. Many of its larger clubs have already voiced concerns, and major investors in motorsports who demand strong governance measures are openly critical. Revenues will flow out of the FIA and out of motorsport if investors cannot trust the leadership looking after their large-scale financial commitments. So you know what's a flipping cheek, chat, in and amongst all this? Here's the cheek. Did you not see Mohammed bin Sulayem on the podium at the US GP? Can you spell Shakespearean levels of false seeming? This is tragic, of Shakespearean proportions now, that we have ourselves a governing body of F1, $1 billion sports franchise that is anything but transparent. And this is where it gets techie, because there are consequences for this. And if past this prologue, sometimes history doesn't rhyme, but it does repeat. You'll recall a few years ago, 2018, the US DOJ, Department of Justice, investigated the dealings of FIFA and the IOC and the USOC. Sometimes the US Department of Justice has to get involved, and they don't mess around. Remember, that's the FBI. There are a gazillion different institutions that ultimately roll into what they call Department of Justice. If they're getting involved, then Mohammed bin Sulayem, Houston, we may have ourselves a problem. Joe Sabard bookends by saying, again, this is Tim Mayer, we strongly believe that a series of ethics violations per Dave Richards and all and sundry, Shayla Ann Rao, all these people who have been hired and since fired, who have been telling us the same thing, that Mohammed bin Sulayem and his organisation, the organisation that he heads, the FIA, allegedly does not know how to behave in a way that is true and set fair. Here's Tim Mayer alluding to that, underscoring that point. Quote, we strongly believe that a series of ethics violations have been committed in this election process, and we have now submitted numerous ethics complaints, but who's going to answer them? Mohammed bin Sulayem is. Can you spell dictatorship? Assuming, continues Tim Mayer, the ethics committee finds validity to our complaints, who does this action go to? The president of the FIA or the Senate president, both of whom are conflicted priorities? Of course, they're marking, ticking and crossing their own homework, and that just doesn't feel right. The statutes, continues Tim Mayer, don't provide for any other method for appeal. What is going on here? I can't even read. This is nonsense. I mean, something must be done about this. Mohammed bin Sulayem can't be allowed to run for as long as he wants. What? That just feels wrong. Tim Mayer continues, The statutes, as they're written now, after Dave Richard tried to protest them being rewritten and amended, don't provide for any other methods for appeal. Where is the accountability ? This is how institutions fail. Touché, sir. Timmer continues, bookends his soliloquy this way. The nominations committee is, by statute, supposed to be transparent. You hear that word again being reiterated. Transparency is everything that the FIA lacks. Opaque at best, as at the time of writing. Mayor continues, yet they have no published minutes, no published meetings, and they refuse to release a list of people who submitted their names for the World Motorsport Council, only a list of people that they allegedly approved. What sort of transparency is this? No minutes for the meetings. What are we doing here? Can you spell authoritarianism and or dictatorship? In fact, continues Mayor, there is no publicly available evidence that this committee actually ever met. What's the point here? Formula One. This is the regulatory body of Formula One. No minutes, no terms and definitions, no transparency across the board. And this is your hero. What are we doing here, chat? Joe Saywood bookends by saying the current political system can reject Mayor's claims, but that may be more damaging because, as the Joe Saywood newsletter had previously reported, buckle up, chat. Here's where it gets techier than techie things. There had been an investigation into Mohammed bin Sulayem's activities. Lest we forget, high-tech arbitration still going on. Mohammed bin Sulayem was like, you know what, high-tech, there is no room here at the F1 in for you at the altar of financial resources or lack thereof. High-tech were like, hang on, what are you talking about? We'll see you in French courts. Lack of resources, prove it. Why don't you look at our financial statements, which outlines nice and neatly the fact that they were resplendent with financial resource. So then what are you talking about, Mohammed bin Sulayem, FIA? So too, Susie Wolff was like, conflict of interest. Prove it. You can't make such damaging allegations without first having evidence. I will see you in court, Susie Wolff says, and these two things are still ongoing. And here's what Joe Saywood says. There's been an investigation into Mohammed bin Sulayem's activities by a US investigation agency called Guidepost. Joe Saywood also understands, allegedly, that multiple sources, a report has now been sent to the US Department of Justice, and that a number of people involved may have already been subpoenaed by the Department of Justice to give evidence over humanity. Do you think these guys mess around? FBI settings, US DOJ. It's going to get techier than techie things. Remember I said that Mohammed bin Sulayem may have won the battle, but he might not be looking lucky enough to win the war. This might sound dramatic, says Joe Saywood, but it should be remembered, if past this prologue, that the same happened a year ago when the DOJ investigated why Liberty Media was opposed to allowing Andretti F1 entry, and then all of a sudden, you remember, they changed the name and Cadillac F1 became the 11th entrant on the 2026 F1 grid. All of a sudden, when people start raising things to a serious entity like the US DOJ, things start to happen. Because that's seriousness. You've got to take those things seriously. Subpoena. What are you going to do when you're called to give evidence? A subpoena's techier than techie things, is it not? A subpoena being a formal written order from a court that compels a person to either produce specific documents or testify in a legal proceeding, or both. Failing to comply with said subpoena can result in penalties such as fines, legal costs, or being held in contempt of court. There are two primary types of subpoena. Attest to something that your boy can't pronounce, which requires a person to appear and give testimony, and a subpoena ducis tecum, which requires the production of documents. I mean, listen, this is serious stuff now, Mohammed bin Sulayem. Do you know what I mean? If you be investigated by the US Department of Justice, then rest assured it might get techier. It might have already gotten techier than techie things. Joe Saywood bookends by saying there are also, in addition to said subpoena, said investigation that's since been handed over to the US Department of Justice. In addition to those things, you have Susie Wolff, French courts, Conflict of interest. What are you talking about? No evidence. So then why would you allege something so heinous? And so too you have High Tech saying financial resources. That's the altar at which you rejected our bid to become the 11th entrant on the F1 grid in 2026. Well, how about this? We had plenty of financial resource, so your maths isn't mathing. Chat is going to get techier than techie things for Mohammed Ben Sulayem going forward, as this investigation, this report has now been handed, sits with the DOJ. There are people being subpoenaed. This is no longer Mickey Mouse settings. This is legal proceedings. It's worthy, therefore, of mention. Mohammed Ben Sulayem, you might have won the battle. You may run unopposed in December to be again president of the FIA, having tinkered with the statutes, having designed yourself a system that now looks more like a dictatorship than a democracy. But I'm not sure on the back of this breaking news that the DOJ is now investigating you, that people have been subpoenaed left, right and centre allegedly per Joe Saywood. I'm not sure, Mohammed Ben Sulayem, that you were set fair to win the war. Oh, the humanity.